Well, welcome everybody. The first good news that I see here is that the back seats didn't get filled up right away. And usually when people take a look at me, they're scared, so they move to the back. I don't know why I'm so scary, but I am. We're going to talk about communicating to lead today. Most of us have leadership positions. Now, our titles might not be leadership positions, but leaders lead, people follow. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How important it is to know the people that you work with, the people you work for, and possibly the people that work for you. So we're going to talk about communicating to lead today. And in the process, we're going to look at creating opportunities. So as we look at opportunities, we're going to talk about saying, why would I start a conversation if I don't need to? And why would I extend a conversation if I don't need to? Because we all worry about time in today's world. So we're going to talk about that as we go. Oh, sorry, I went a little too fast there. Sorry. We'll get back. Demonstrate the effective questioning and listening skills. So we're going to start to talk about strengthening relationships, how important it is to know the people that you're dealing with, especially if they work for you in some way or side by side with you. I'm going to thump on something that I always thump on. And so you're going to hear, when I ask the crowd questions today, you all, the answer is usually going to be ask questions. All right? So you already know the answer to the question I'm going to ask most of all today. The second answer is going to be something like, know your people. And between those two, almost every slide, almost everything that we delve into today is going to have to do with that. Now, normally when I do this class, and I charge a lot of money to do this class, there's a workbook. So you all would be working together. You'd be at tables and you'd have small groups and you'd be doing workbook stuff. As you can see, the manual that I gave you today is just pictures of the slides. Because this is really more like a presentation rather than a workbook session, because I don't know each one of you. If it were a workbook session, I'd know each one of you and what you do and where we're trying to go with this. But today it's going to be a presentation. We're still going to be able to get through the objectives, and it should be a lot of fun to get to that point. But we're also looking at various forms of communication and their impact. We'll start right off with a different form of communication than where we're going to spend most of our time today. And that's linear communication. By the way, you don't have to be able to speak to do what I do up here, right? It's linear communication, and linear communication is very common in government. You have to get a policy out to somebody, you got to get directions out to somebody. Whatever it is, it's I'm sending you a message. Boom. There is a sender, there's a receiver, and there's a message. I'm assuming you get it. But listen to this now. We have an HR manager that I swear at least once a week I get a policy thing in the email. Policy, okay? Love the word, first of all, policy. And the policies are always huge. I mean, they're always something, and I understand. I have a master's degree, but I still can't read, if you know what I mean. I mean, I can't just read something in a minute. So I look at these policies, and what do you think I do with them? They're online, all right, and what do? I file them, exactly. I might open them up and say, oh, good, that's a policy about, well, we have a lot of regulation in the industry. One of our federal policies, okay? And I won't even start to mention them. There's too many of them. So there's a federal policy. So I say, oh, that's good, that's interesting. And then I file it. I file a hard copy, and then I even take the email and I file it under HR policies. I got a separate file down there. Am I ever going to look at it again? Because what happens is, the HR manager will call me up, Dick, didn't you get that policy because I made a mistake? Rarely do I make mistakes, but occasionally. And so I make a mistake, and she says, didn't you get that policy? Well, yeah, I did, you know, and so she has to tell me what it said anyway, right? So I don't get them. And this is the problem with linear communication. I have to do it. I have people that work for me, and I have people who work for me out of town, up in Columbus and up in Cincinnati, etc. So I often have to get policies, procedures, information out to other people. But you know what I've decided by now? As long as I'm doing linear communications, I've decided in general they're not going to get it. So almost even in linear communications, I usually go beyond just getting the information out, meaning I want to talk to you about it, either face-to-face or we're going to do a video conferencing or even just teleconferencing of some kind. But I'm usually going to ask for more than just getting the message over to this person. Now, here's how you would do it. Here's some of the stuff: policy procedure, letters, voicemails, and then you got, I don't think that was mine because I think I turned mine off, but in case it's mine, it's off. Email, text messages, videos, a lot of good reasons. Notice it doesn't say video conferencing, it says videos. So all the ways that I can get these out to people, I can use email, I can use all forms of print media, I can get stuff out. That's what you do in your business. You do it a lot. But you don't know who gets it. Now, I can tell you who gets it from the Oldham Era. The one person that I know that reads the Oldham Era from cover to cover is my wife. And if I want to know anything about what's going on in Oldham County, I say, what's going on? She said, oh, we got a ghost walk Saturday night that we're going on. We are, by the way. We've been on it like 4 times before, but we're going again. But she knows everything that goes on. So you say, we want to get the message out to people in Oldham County. How can I get the message out to Dick Bryan? Put it in the Oldham Era, because Lori Bryan will say, all right? She's good about that. But typically, that's the way I'm going to get. I'm not going to read it. I might read a headline, and it looks good. And because Dave and I have been friends for a long time, if it's something that Dave is saying, I'm going to, the judge, if he's going to say something, then I usually follow that also. No offense, John, but when you say something, I listen also, John Black. So anyway, this is linear communication. It's extremely common, most common in government, because you do have to get messages to the people and to your people, the people within the government itself. What we're going to spend most of our time on today, though, is interactive communication. I started to talk about that because there's something missing in communication, which is what? You can see it here. What's missing in linear communication? Yeah, I'm not really seeing the person, seeing what. So what's missing? What's up here that was missing on the first slide? Feedback, right? So now feedback is very different. You might see the people, they get it. Yeah, they hear you, right? Well, I have a couple of people that work for me in my office, and one of them, if I said, Bill, do you understand? Do you get this? He'd say, and that's okay. You know what? That means he got it. But I got this young, vibrant young man, real strapping, handsome young man. Some of you have met him before because he's usually with me. In fact, he was going to be with me this morning, but he had another appointment. He played soccer for U of L. We recruited him from Indianapolis. I mean, really top-notch guy. But he's so excited that, he's listening to me about that much because he's ready to go out the door and do something good, So I have to have him repeat some things to me so that the head nod isn't enough. Yeah, I get it, but he's really ready to go on to something else. And that's great. That's one of the wonderful things about his personality. But I need more feedback from him. I need to be able to know, and I need more feedback from almost everybody, especially the people up north, because it's usually over the telephone or it's usually video conferencing, something where we're conferencing, and if it's not video, for example, we probably do more teleconferencing. What's happening on the other end of the telephone when we're teleconferencing? We've got like 10 people on the telephone. What's happening on the other end? What are they doing? They're answering emails, they're playing solitaire, they're doing 100 other things. So my feedback then becomes extremely important, right? Now I say, okay, what's feedback to you? What's the best feedback to you? When you're talking to anybody, your kids, your spouse, your employees, your fellow employees, your boss, what's the best feedback to you when you've got a message? Recap, wonderful statement. Recap what you heard. I typically will paraphrase almost everything that people say to me, because what that means is I've taken what you said and I put it in my words. Am I right? So now I'm even looking for feedback. You're sending a message to me. I'm giving you feedback about that message, but I'm asking for feedback. Am I on the same page as you? Because I changed your words. This is what I thought you meant. Okay? So feedback becomes, in my opinion, the essence of a good conversation. Now, here's where the problem comes in. I don't know whether these numbers are on the screen or not. Sometimes I type them in, but I didn't today, I don't think. Some of you know because you've seen me before, and I may even have done this at the Christmas party, although remember we only had 10 minutes, and I said I needed an hour and a half. 55% of communication is body language. So face to face, eye to eye, there you are. How much do you think is tone of voice? Listen to my tone of voice. You've heard everything I've said today, right? Well, some of you are off in another land, but basically, you've heard everything I've said today. How much percent do you think of communication is tone of voice? If 55% is body language. 38. You know what that leaves? That leaves 7%. Okay? 7% for words. And what do we prepare? We prepare words, right? Look I even brought my words with me today, like I usually do. Look at I got highlights, I got notes, I got all kinds of, I got all kinds of stuff here because, I'm going to make sure that I give them everything I got. And then I didn't even open the folder, much less look at this, right? Because why? The words are not nearly as important as the message. And if the message is going to get across with body language and with tone of voice, why would I spend so much time on words? Now the exception, Mr. Judge Executive, is in politics, you got to be careful of your words, right? Because those words are going to be repeated over and over and over. So, and they're going to be in the newspaper, including the Old America, so that means Lori Bryan's going to read them. And you're going to see them on television. You're going to see them on Channel 25. You're going to see them on Channel 10. You're going to see them all over. So in politics, obviously, the words are more important. But overall, the message gets across because of the body language and the tone of voice. Now, I can't change my body language. I've tried. You have to look at it and say, wow, I wonder what I look like, when I'm communicating. And hopefully I'll know after this. But I wonder what I look like when I'm communicating. Now, I know because I've been doing this for over 40 years. So as you think about that, you say, how can I communicate better? Well, the answer is be yourself, because you can't put on me, but I can't put on you. I tried. I said, from now on, I'm going to be deeply enthusiastic. It's going to come through my eyes instead of this, because this is me, right? And I'm just going to be that inner fire enthusiasm, okay? So as I try to be the inner fire enthusiasm, I look like a fool. The good news is I actually saw it taped. That's back when they taped. I was taking a class called High Impact Presentations, Dale Carnegie courses. By the way, Dale Carnegie courses are my biggest product within my department, which is the International Center for Corporate Learning. We are also a corporate training company. And inside that, the Dale Carnegie courses, we have what's called High Impact Presentations, 2 days long. And you go and you make a presentation with a coach, an instructor coaching you, and then you go to a TV screen with your jump drive with another coach coaching you. And when I saw myself and what I looked like to try to be this deeply enthusiastic, through my eyes person, I thought, oh my God. And he said, fortunately, I knew the instructor really well. He said, oh my God. He said at the same time I did. So we made some good change. we said, Dick, let's be yourself. So it comes out very effusive, no, that's the wrong word, extravagantly with me. I mean, I do that. That's me. That would be very difficult for some people. So don't try to do it. But don't hide what you're trying to do with your body language. Let your body language follow your words. If your words are important to you, let them drive you. And notice the other thing I do, and it's automatic, I don't do it on purpose, but I said drive you. You see how I emphasized a power word? Sometimes you can think about that. A lot of times I talk to people and they'll say a power word under their breath. They'll say, yeah, that really drives me. Or drives me. Now I'm not sure what they said. I'm going to be 70 years old in less than a month. So, you know, my ears just don't work the way they used to. I sometimes wear hearing aids, but they don't help enough. So the point is, make the things that you want to emphasize them. Make your body language emphasize them, and make your tone of voice emphasize them. So now we look at, whoops, did I go through these things? This happens every now and then when I do this stuff. So I'm a sender. I got a message. I send it to the receiver. They give me feedback, and they send it back to me. See what's in the middle here? On your slides, you can see what's in the middle there. You tell me. There's only 4 of them in there, but there's 100 of them. There's 100 filters, right? What are some of the filters? What gets in the way of me understanding you or you understanding me? Go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead.
Your thoughts and your distractions.
I have no idea what you're really thinking about. Miller time. That's the first thing that I think of, because when I'm sitting in a class that's as boring as I am, I usually think, when's Miller time going to come? You know, it's got to happen. So what else? What are some other filters?
Preconceived notion.
Sure. Absolutely, all the way out. My favorite with this, it's really an assumption and a preconceived notion. My car doesn't start. So this young lady, your name is? Tracy. Tracy says to me, what's wrong? Maybe I can help you. I'm 70 years old. A lady says to me she's going to help me start my car. See, the assumption, preconceived notion is, woman wouldn't know how to start my car. What's she talking about? She's a woman. Wonderful things that she can do that I can't, but not start the car, all right? Yet, here we live near Fort Knox. How many mechanic women do you think are on the base at Fort Knox? Probably hundreds, right? So preconceived notions have to go out the window. Assumptions have to go out the window. So as we look at these, mention a few more. There's hundreds more. Yes, ma'am?
What I want.
What I want. Okay, good. So all of a sudden, I'm adding to it when I'm looking at a filter. I'm adding to it my thoughts and the other person, what they want. So we add filters. What else? What are common filters? Things that get in the way of you and I being able to talk on an equal level.
Interruptions.
Interruptions happen all the time, and we let them happen. Folks, when I grew up, you picked up the phone, held it to your ear to see if there was somebody else on the line, meaning a neighbor. I don't mean in the house, because there's only one phone in the house, right? And then when they got off, you said, Norfolk 2534, or Betty, would you get me Norfolk 2534? So anyway, and now look at what we're doing today. So the colossal amount of interruptions and changes in the electronic world that happen today. Some other filters. Yeah. Dina, welcome. It's so nice to see you back there. I didn't see you come in. Absolutely, makes a huge difference. Dina's back there. She's got a nice, strong voice, thank goodness. But if she had a very gentle voice, I would have caught a few of her words, right? So just that, for one thing. But then the other thing, it's a big room, or it's a noisy room, or it's a lot of other things, so that happens. What about education? I'm talking to somebody about a subject, and I use a big word. And there's a couple of words that I use commonly that in some rooms, I immediately, not all rooms, but in some rooms, I immediately define. For example, I say, yeah, and that just exacerbates the situation, makes it worse. You see? Because what I'm looking at is I'm filtering. I'm looking right away and I'm saying, there's probably some people that don't know what the word exacerbates means. I didn't know what it meant until I was well past my college years. So those kind of things, education levels, cultural levels, huge difference in today's world, where people were brought up right here in the United States. But it goes beyond that too. I was sitting at a table at a franchisee training meeting about 3 years ago in Long Island, and my wife called. We were at dinner with most of the other members of the class that I was in, this franchisee class. My wife called me and I answered the cell phone. She said, "What's going on?" I said, "Listen to this." And I held the phone out over the table and put it back to my ear, and she said, "What was that?" And I said, "I'm sitting at a table with 9 other franchisees that are training right now, and I'm the only American at the whole table." Incredible. I was the only one. In fact, there were only 2 people English first language, me and somebody from Great Britain. So, I mean, it's just an incredible difference today when you look at cultural differences when you're talking to people. What else? The reason I'm spending time here is this is something that really gets in the way of communication is the filters. Dina?
I think there's an obvious filter, and that's gender.
I would agree. I kind of brought some of that up earlier, but there's absolutely a difference.
There's also mechanical filters such as like junk mail and.
No question. No question. Mechanical things happen. I mean, everything. What else?
Preconceived opinion.
So
I'm not even going to listen.
Exactly. I'm looking for your feedback, but I don't really want it. This is one-way conversation. Even though you think it's a two-way conversation, it's one way. And it's my way or the highway.
What about the dialect, of somebody from the South talking to someone from New York or Boston or, just the difference in language or dialect?
No question. Or accent, yeah, no question.
That's a really good one, because you're internally laughing at their funny accent and
Yeah.
trying to mock it.
Yeah.
But you're trying to be professional.
You're trying to be professional at the same time, that's right.
You can't wait to imitate it for your spouse and your coworkers.
Exactly. I grew up in upstate New York. I grew up in Rochester, New York, and have spent most of my life in the South. And so there were some big changes, especially my first time was Texas, and there was a part of Texas that, guys, you think you hear accents around here, I got to tell you. I never could quite tell the difference between a pen and a pin. Pin, okay? There's no difference in Lubbock, Texas, none. Okay. Anyway, I went through my Air Force pilot training there and then went back from Vietnam to there as an instructor. And when I got back, I still couldn't understand the language. It's different. So accents are huge. I know we had a plant in England about an hour and a half by train north of London, and my last company. And I would travel there about 3 or 4 times a year, and I would teach classes there, usually leadership classes of some kind or Six Sigma classes, statistics and stuff. And it would take me the first 2 days at least to be able to get to the accent again and know the question I was even being asked. Because not only do you have the accent, but you have the use of words. So in the South, in England, in wherever, in the North, in the West, people use different terminologies that happen. Again, more filters, okay? So as we...
I was going to say.
Sure, go ahead.
Your physical, whether or not you have a headache or got enough sleep last night or you're hungry or.
Yeah, sometimes it's pure attentiveness. I've got other things that are more important and they take over. And they do. Biologically, your headache does take over from listening to people. Hunger does take over from listening to people. So biologically, that can be in the way. So here's some key filters. And then we broke them. We talked a bit about assumptions, but that happens a lot. One of the things that we do train on, and Dale Carnegie, it's very common to train on, and that's being more positive about things, but certainly being more positive about people. So when I look at assumptions, the other thing that happens is when people walk up to me, what's traditionally true of humans, unfortunately, is that when somebody walks up to them, what we see is what's wrong. The hair's too long, the hair's too short. They wear glasses, they don't wear glasses. They're a girl, they're a guy. They're, all this stuff. They're dressed funny, they're not dressed funny. They're dressed too good, they're dressed too bad. We make these value as somebody's walking up to us, right? So I usually ask in this area, I ask people, and this is probably the hardest thing to ask, within 2 minutes of meeting this person, what can you say about them that you like? What would you say out loud to them that you like about them? Now all of a sudden, I'm challenging myself. So now when they walk up to me, I'm thinking, ooh, I only got 120 seconds to figure out what I like about this person. So what do you have to look at? Yeah, you have to put all the other stuff away. It's a girl, it's a guy, their hair's too long, their hair's too short, they wear glasses, they don't wear glasses. You have to put that aside and look for what I do like about that person. Enough that I can tell them it in a short period of time. So, assumptions really do make it difficult because we just allow it to get in the way of so many things. It's the formation of prejudice. It's the formation of, and I mean the prejudice against people who are too tall, too short, hair's too long, hair's too short, etc. And then cultural viewpoints. We talked about these a little bit, but it's just right here in Louisville. I mean, I'm not in Louisville, but usually I'm teaching downtown Louisville. Right here in the Louisville area, you've got the west end of Louisville culture completely different than the south end of Louisville culture, highly manufacturing, to the east end of Louisville culture, mostly info systems and things like that. So a lot of those cultural viewpoints. In the context of the relationship. So David and I have had a pretty good relationship for the last few years, and something very interesting happened to me. I pulled up at a stop sign a few years back, a very busy stop sign. There, standing in the middle of the road, is the judge executive. What the heck is Dave doing in the middle of the road? And he walks up to my car, and you know what he said? You know Judge Dave well enough to know what he said. What did he say?
Fix this.
That was the second thing he said. First thing he said was, "Hi, Dick." Now, that's back before he and I had interfaced that many times, and I was very impressed that he was, because there you're in the middle, you don't know who's going to pull up, right? You have no idea. And so, I mean, if he had had a list of who was going to pull up, that's something else, but that was really good. So the context of relationship, we know each other. What Dave and I say to each other, what Judge Executive Dave and I say to each other might be very different than the way we say it to someone here else in the room that I don't know that well. And John Black and I have known each other for years. So the context of relationship, and I say things differently to my son, who still lives with us at 47 years old, and my wife, okay? My daughter lives in Norfolk, Virginia, where we used to live. And so those contexts of that relationship, my daughter and I are very close, but she's 670 miles away. My son and I are close, but we're in the same house, okay? And we're on a different page on almost everything. He's a carpenter and I'm a teacher, so a lot of different things. But you see how that can happen? And what I always worry about is this. We allow sometimes that relationship, we're so close with the people we work with or that work for us or we work for, we may be so close with that relationship that we forget to be civil. We forget respect sometimes. And in fact, I've always heard that if you treated your friends like you treated your family, you wouldn't have any friends. So I really worry about that because my wife and I have a wonderful, 48 years, we have a wonderful relationship. And that's because we both had to work at it. We made sure that respect became a key word in our relationship at not a really early time in our marriage, but early enough that it made a difference. So the context of relationship makes a big difference on who you're talking to. Somebody already started to talk about this too. Man, last night at home, here you are at work that day, you're just trying to get away from home because you had such a horrendous family experience the night before and that morning maybe. And you're at work just to get away from it. And so in this emotional baggage area, we want to certainly get away from the emotional baggage. And you really can't delve too much into somebody's personal life unless they're telling it to you, of course, obviously. And you have to just be a good listener, which we'll talk about in a little while. But sometimes that has to get out of the way. You're really not going to be able to get to the subject. You're not going to be able to lead the way you need to lead until you actually get past some of the emotional baggage that's in the way. And some of it may be emotional baggage between the two of you. It may be, this young man that I work with is just absolutely dynamite, but every once in a while I say things, and without thinking, I say things, and it might hurt his feelings. And the good news about our relationship, he'll tell me about it later on. And it's good. We can work on it. We can get the emotional stuff out of the way. And so that becomes a good way of getting rid of some of this stuff so that we can make the communication that we need between us. But people come to work with emotional baggage. In fact, the hardest part about leading people is what? Personal issues. I mean, you can think all you want about business, and they want to do this, they don't want to do that, and all the stuff you think about in business and leading people. But the biggest issue comes down to personal stuff. And so that can be a huge change. Now, some of this is going to be obvious. There are various levels of listening. One of them is to ignore, and I can become very good at that with my son. And some of the reasons for that, how do you use ignore? In other words, ignore is a form of listening, of not listening, but the listening level. How can you use it?
Bypassing rudeness or something that on the part of the person you're listening to. In other words, letting something pass that doesn't need to be acknowledged.
Okay, good. Yeah, all right. We probably shouldn't deal with this right now, so I'm going to ignore it. All right. Is that what you meant? Okay. So, exactly. My son, on the other hand, goes on and on about some of the silliest, his interest could not be different. He watches old black and white movies. I watch high adventure color movies, okay? So the big difference, and yet he would stand there in front of me and tell me about an old black and white movie. I don't care about an old black and white movie. So there are times that I have to ignore just to get the conversation closed. I have to ask questions just to help close the conversation down so that we can get over it. And yet, respect is a key area of that, so I have to do it in a way that looks like respect. And it is respect, but at the same time, how do I shut you down? How do I get away from this conversation? There's pretend listening. You see the smile on their face, and you see the plastic in their cheeks, and you have no clue what's going on behind their eyes. And thinking, yeah, and then I'm telling them what to do and all this stuff. Nothing, right? So, this is where I talk about the glass over the eyes. There's some of it in the room right now. When you're doing a presentation, or you're even talking one-on-one to somebody, and their eyes glass over, now I know in my case, this may not be your case, but in my case, I know that they're paying attention, because it's me. I'm Dick. I only speak pearls of wisdom, nothing less than pearls. So obviously they're paying attention and they just look funny, all right? Glassy eyes, etc. They're not listening. When you see glass over people's eyes, they're not listening. Either ask a question, change the subject, or go away, but they're not listening. So they may pretend really well. This kid that I was in officer training school and pilot training with, his name was John Mitchell. My kids called him Mitchell. And Mitchell could sit there in a class. He had these glasses on, and they were a little dark. They weren't sunglasses, but they were darkened, almost like today's glasses that change light as you're going out, but they were almost permanently darkened. He could be sound asleep and still writing. Now, he wasn't writing words. If you looked at his paper, it was scribbled. But the rest of us, boom, we get whacked in the back of the head. Pay attention, Lieutenant, better, or whatever it is. And but he could do it better than anybody in the world. Never got found out. But pretend listening. And of course, then there's selective. All of us get accused of this, by our spouses if we have them, by our friends if we have them. Okay. But all of us get accused of, you only hear what you want to hear, right? And that some of it's true no matter what. And here's something that's a difficulty. One of the difficulties with listening, how much faster can you listen than you can talk? But how much faster, speed-wise, can you listen rather than talk? Your brain has 10 times the power of the speed of speech. So you've got 90% of your brain with nothing to do while you're listening to somebody. Okay? We'll talk about it a little bit more when we get on further, but all of a sudden, I've got all this other stuff, Miller time, I've got all this other stuff going on in my mind, and I'm kind of waiting for you to say a keyword. And you may say a keyword, you may say, yeah, sales jumped, and I'm going, ooh, sales jumped, I need to hear more of this. So all of a sudden I'm back in with you, right? So I'm selective listening. And so a lot of us do that. We don't know we do this. One of the things that starts it is this. You all think, oh, no, I'm really comfortable. I am, too. I love sitting. I did it last night. We were at an executive meeting last night, and this lady told she wrote a book, but she told one of the most exciting stories I ever heard. And I still found that if I did this, my mind would start to wander. This is it. Within 60 seconds, I'm going to be trailing somewhere else. So I have to open my arms to do this. Some of you, it doesn't bother you, and you say, I'm comfortable with that. I understand. But typically, you're going to move into another area. So you become selective. In fact, you open your arms when they say something different. Oh, yeah. And then we move into attentive listening. This is as high as you can go that you can guarantee. Now, back to what I was saying. I got all this brain power here, and then I can only listen this much because the person can only talk that fast. So what do I do with the rest of the brain power? Attentive listening. What do I do? You tell me.
Give it a rest.
I'm sorry?
Give it a nap.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I'd fall asleep with some people, but yeah. What else?
Formulate questions.
Absolutely. I'm right away, and those questions have to be focused on that person and on that subject. In fact, I may start thinking about things that happened to me so that I can put myself in that person's shoes. By the way, if I do, I've moved to empathetic listening. I'm now with them in the story. In fact, they don't even have to tell me the whole story. I'm there. Because of a few things that they said and maybe a few key questions that I asked and they answered, all of a sudden, boom, I'm there with them. Empathetic listening. You can't guarantee empathetic listening every time, but you can guarantee attentive listening. And here's some of the things that I do for that. One of them is, I used to say to myself, I need to hear this. Now I say it out loud. When somebody's talking to me and it's a subject that I do need to hear or should hear, I'll say, boy, I need to hear this. And then I have to take the rest of my brain power and focus it toward what that person's saying. And again, it might be some of my own experiences. I got to be careful not to interrupt with my own experiences. But what I do have to do is ask questions. And as I told you in the beginning, the biggest answer to my questions today is going to be ask questions. Second one is know your people. But you don't know your people if you're not asking questions. So right away, my son can start a conversation about things that don't interest me very much. And so what do? There are times. There are times I have to shut him off because of what I've got going on. What I try to do is ask really good questions that make it more interesting for me. So if you're telling me a story and I'm asking you questions, it's because I want to get in the picture with you, but I need different information. You didn't tell me what kind of a day it was. You didn't tell me if the sun was shining. You didn't tell me what the temperature was. So I don't know. So some people say a picture is worth 1,000 words. In many cases it is. Cary Grant. Okay? But what I miss then is that passion. I miss the person's voice. I miss, if it's a moving picture, you might still see the body language, but if it's not, you don't even get the body language. You can get parts of it, but not much. So to me, it'd be nice to have the picture, but I'd also want the words. I want to talk to somebody. I want to be able to ask them questions. I want to know more about it. But I want to know the abouts, to me, that put me in the picture. So all of a sudden, I've become not just the attentive listener, but I've become the empathetic listener. I'm part of your story now. I'm part of your incident. Now, interruptions. I mentioned this because of what happens. Now I've got my story. Well, wait till they stop. They think this story is good. Well, they hear what happened to me. Because, folks, since I am going to be 70 years old, my incidents are way better than yours. I have experienced everything, and way better than yours. I mean, mine may have been equal to yours when I was your age, but now I've got ones that are just even better. So I'm obviously, no matter what you say, I've got a story that ups your story. It's one up from your story, no question. Don't we all feel that way? I mean, honestly, you don't have to nod your heads, but some of you will and you should. But we all think that way. It's okay to use that story, but don't tell it. You're using that story to put yourself in the picture with this person because the same kind of thing happened to you once. That's okay. But you can't tell that story. That's not what it's about. It's about them. In a conversation, it's about them. And there's a 60-40 rule. 60% airtime is theirs. 40% is yours. What do you do with the 40%? You already know the answer. Ask questions. So, I'm asking the questions for that 40% of the time, and guess what else I'm doing with the 60% of the time? I'm listening to the answers. So here's the difference. If I've got a reporter standing here, and there might be one in the room, if I've got a reporter standing here, they have a list of 5 questions they're going to ask me, and it doesn't matter what I answer. It makes no difference. They've got these 5 questions that are going to be answered, right? So how many times have you seen Mitch McConnell, Barack Obama, et cetera, people stand there and answer the same question over and over again because those 5 questions are going to be asked. No matter how many times I've answered them, they're still going to ask them, right? That's not communication. That's obviously linear, not two-way communication, not interactive. So I have to make sure that my questions are so good that the person doesn't even know I asked them. I'm just part of their conversation. I'm listening to their answers, and if I'm paying really good attention to their answers, my next question should flow. It should be automatic. Because what happens sometimes, people say, oh, Dick says ask questions, rat-a-tat-a-tat-a-tat-a-tat. Person feels like they're getting, sorry, officers, but the 3rd degree, right? They feel like they're getting beat up. And that's not what these questions are about. The questions are about how can I make this not only more interesting for me, but for them. They can build a better picture. They can build a better story. I mean, just amazing stuff that people do when your questions are good. Are your questions ever going to be wrong and stupid? Absolutely. There's no question that when you start working with it and asking more questions and paying attention to the answer, you're going to end up asking some stupid questions. I remember a guy was coaching some people. I was training some new instructors in Omaha, Nebraska one time. And this guy says to the person in the front of they were talking about building something. And he talked about a 2x4, and the guy says, how wide was a 2x4? I mean, you're going to ask some stupid questions because you're putting yourself on the spot to ask questions, so you're just trying to come up with questions. Stop that and just think about with the conversation. What could make this conversation more real for you? What picture do you need to see to make this conversation more real to you? So we can then get from this attentive area all the way up into the empathetic area. It's okay? Ooh, time does fly, doesn't it? Sorry about that. We're up to slide like number 4 out of, so we'll go as far as we can. So the listening ladder, you notice ladder, L-A-D-D-E-R. Look at the other person. You already know that, right? Where do we look at the other person? But if I stare at you, she's going to eventually say, yeah, she's going to say, whoa, stalker, right? So you got to be careful. What you're doing is you don't want to stare somebody down, because eventually you get to that point when you're staring at somebody where they don't know if you're even paying attention. That can be that pretend listening. So you really, you look at the other person, you do look at their eyes, but you don't stare at them. You know, I look down at the person's mouth and I look back at their eyes, but I don't go off of them. I don't look down the hall and see who's walking down the hall and things like that. Or at the clock. By the way, I keep clocks all over. I have a little airplane on my desk. My wife always buys me an airplane because of my Air Force experience. And on the front of it, there's a little clock about that big, and nobody can see it from the other side of the table. It's right there. So I got clocks on my phone, clock on my computer, clock. Because what I do is this. If somebody comes into my office to talk to me, and I can see that it's, let's say, a personal issue, because that's what we talked about. It's an emotional issue. I immediately block time in my mind. I say, how much time can I give to do I have 10 free, I usually use 10s. Do I have 10 free minutes right now that I don't have to get up and go someplace? And if I do that, block that off in my mind, now it's clear. So now I'm not thinking about my next meeting. I'm not thinking about a phone call I need to make. I'm not thinking about that. I've got this 10 minutes free and clear to do it. So now I can start talking to that individual and focus on the individual rather than the clock. But at about 10 minutes, right, my eyes are going to hit the clock. Because now I got to say what? At 10 minutes, what do I have to say? I'm sorry? Gotta go. Maybe have to go. Or I may say to myself, do I have another 10 minutes? You know, at some point in time, I've got to say, hey, let's go across the street to Buckhead after work and we'll talk about this or something like that.
Can you let them know ahead of time that you only have 10 minutes?
Absolutely, I do it all the time. In fact, it's the most respectful thing to do is to say to somebody, listen, in 10 minutes I have to go do such and such. So can we talk right now or should we talk later? Yeah. It's just respect. And when somebody is in my office, I also say to them before it happens, not after it happens, before it happens, I'm expecting an important phone call. If I get it, I'm sorry, but I have to take it. Rather than when the phone call comes, you look at it and say, oh, I'm sorry, I have to take it. That, you know, the phone's more important than they are. And so we have to be careful of that, right? But good question. Thank you. All right, ask questions. We've said that enough. Don't interrupt. My story is better than yours, so I'll interrupt. Now, these two things together, again, we're going to go back and say, if your questions are good enough, they don't even know you ask them, so it's not interruptive. It's just part of the conversation. What was that like? How long did it take? What was the terrain like? Was the sun out? Okay. So, and then don't change the subject. Certainly they're going to bring up things that your mind is going to think, oh yeah, you know, we should talk about this, we should talk about that, or, you know, wait till you hear about this. Whatever it is, so don't change the subject, stay on the subject. This is interesting, express motion with control. What do you think express emotion with control means?
Facial expression.
Facial expression could be good, what else?
Tone of voice.
Right away, sure. Now, if I talked to a one-on-one person in my office the way I do in front of a group, what might that do to somebody? You see, what might that do to a one-on-one in my office? Oh, it intimidates, scare them off. You know, I just wanted to have a conversation. All of a sudden, I'm getting a speech, right? So that is losing control. How do I be just as enthusiastic as I am, just as friendly as I am, just as respectful as all the things that I am, how can I be that and not be this? Okay? Now, I don't have to think about it usually, because I usually don't jump up out of my chair and start doing this. So I start with the word respect. How would this person, because of this is their conversation, they started it, how does this person, with my respect, how should I respond to this person? Now, I usually don't have to think about it. I mean, you roll with the punches. What do I have to think about? We've already talked about it. Body language. We've already talked about it. What do I have to think about? They're talking, right?
Next question.
Next question. What do I want to know? They're telling me something. What more do I want to know? So I'm getting into that conversation so that I can develop that talk and make it even better. For me, and then hopefully for them at the same time. A lot of times people walk away from a good conversation knowing more about their subject than they knew when they started, because you ask good questions. Okay? And then respond appropriately. We're going to go back to questions and knowing your people and knowing the people that you're talking to. The better you know your people, the better you know what appropriate is. Let me give you an example. I use this example a lot, John, so you've heard it already. My wife is an outstanding cook. We owned restaurants back in Virginia, in Norfolk, Virginia, years ago, partially because she is an outstanding cook. Now, we had chefs and everything, but when it came to putting the meals together and everything, it was Lori. And in fact, people have broken engagements because Lori said, "Come to dinner Saturday night." And you could hear them look at each other and say, "We'll call John and tell him we'll be there Friday or Sunday." Because you were invited by Lori. And not only is she a wonderful cook, but she's a wonderful hostess. So I will come in the morning and I'll say, "Whoa, what do you got cooking? It smells great." Now, by the way, you can't lie. If any of it's a lie, you're screwed. Excuse my language, but you're screwed. So you got to tell her the truth, but you tell her. She wants to hear it. Wonderful. Rainey, what are you cooking? Well, I got a surprise. And then she'll, throughout the day, and then you'll see her start to put dessert together, and she makes sure that if it were pork, there's apples, and there's probably apple pie for dessert and all. She matches everything. I mean, just perfect. But she's also very creative. She'll open the newspaper in the morning, there's a recipe. She says, "How about if we do this tonight for the guests?" First time try for the guest. I can only remember one time it was an absolute failure, but most of the time it's not. So anyway, she'll do one, and you tell her all day long. People walk in the door, what do they say? "Whoa, smells good in here, Rain. What'd you do, Lori?" They call her Lori, I call her Rainey. Her name is Lorraine, so that's why I call her Rainey. Anyway, everything, and the people, oohs and ahs. When you sit down and say the prayer, what's the first thing you have to do after the prayer? You better take a bite, because she's going to say, "How is it?" and be embarrassing if you don't know. So you immediately take a bite. "Oh, this is terrific." You let her know throughout the whole meal. Of course, the dessert comes out and it's perfect. "Oh, Lorraine, people, blah, blah, blah. That's my wife, Lori." Okay? My son, on the other hand, worked with us in the restaurant, also a wonderful cook and very creative. If he saw the recipe, he would change it along the way. Say, "I think I'll put some of the..." He would make, and usually a dynamite meal. Mouth-watering, notice. Dynamite meal. When my son finishes, you walk up and you say, "Nice job, John." He doesn't want the spotlight. He doesn't want in fact, he wouldn't do it for a year if you gave him spotlight in front of friends, in front of others. Doesn't want that. Okay? So you got people you deal with, right? That are this way or this way. You got my wife, needs all kinds of praise, right? And then you got my son, who would rather have it. So when I'm praising somebody, I usually know that about the person. I'll call people around, Say, "Wow, guys, look what Chase did this morning. He finished this deal at General Electric. It's just a super deal. I wanted to tell him what was right, da-da-da-da." And in fact, here's a gift for him. I bought him a gift certificate across the street at Buckhead. Then you got the people that do the same thing, and you walk up to them and say, you slide them the gift certificate to Buckhead, right? You slide it to them. And you say, really, really nice job, John. Congratulations. Here's a gift certificate to Buckhead. So just know your people. I used to do this when I was general manager of a company in Bullitt County. I used to take people to lunch for certain things. We had these targets to meet and all that stuff, and I would take them to lunch. Finally, it occurred to me that they didn't want to go to lunch with me. So I started giving them gift certificates so they could go with their spouse or whoever. And that worked a lot better. But guess what? Some of them still wanted to go to lunch with me. So I had to make sure that I knew my people well enough to know, hey, it's lunch with me, or it's here, go take your spouse to lunch. Something like that. So that's appropriate. I know my people well enough that I know what all the stuff that's going on with here, and the way I'm supposed to respond to somebody and what they appreciate with my responses, how outgoing my response is or how delicate my response is, really depends a lot on the person, not on me. Okay. And if you do it wrong, you're making a huge mistake. The biggest mistake you make is if the person likes a nice quiet, just let me know I'm doing okay and leave me alone. And you go, come on around, everybody, and they're just shrinking, God. That's the biggest mistake you make. Because the other mistake is, if the person likes to have all the praise, if it's Lori Bryan, and likes to have all the praise, and you slide them the gift certificate and say, good job, they'll do it for you. They'll stand up and say, oh, what's this? Hey, look at the boss gave me a gift certificate because I did a good job. They'll do it for you. They'll take care of it. So you just have to be careful. You have to make sure you know your people, know who you're dealing with. Okay, really listen. This is something that sounds easy, regular listening events. So I say, how do I do that? I got a really busy day. How do I do it? Schedule them. That's exactly what it's saying is just schedule them. Say, can you give me 10 minutes tomorrow, John? Let's sit down and just talk for about 10 minutes. All right? And do it. Now, what are you going to do during that 10 minutes?
Ask questions.
I'm sorry?
Ask questions.
Ask, see? There's really only two answers, and you couldn't have been wrong with either one of them. But you're going to ask questions. And here's what I mean by that. Become the consummate coach. Every conversation you get into, get better at questions. So I had somebody say to me one time, but Dick, this was in a class. He said, Dick, I'm not very good at questions, and I know it. I'm always seeking. I said, come back next week with 25 lines on a piece of paper with 25 questions. He said, where am I going to get them? I said, every place. Get them from your family, watch television, watch a movie, listen at work. As soon as you see a good question, write it down. So this guy came back the next week with 50. Both sides of the page. He had 50 questions. And I said, that's terrific. I said, now you can't read them. He says, I've already taken my favorites and put them in my words. He got it. Within a half a day, I think he said, I got it. I started listening to questions, and it was really easy to pick some of them up and write some of them down. So schedule events where you can do that. You can practice questions. You can coach people to really good conversations and get it going. And expect that you'll be held accountable. When you say something to me, I better have listened. Can I repeat it? Can I remember? And so that makes a big difference. So if Tracy said to me, you didn't even remember my name, and here I gave it to you when you asked me, what kind of a person, I wasn't paying attention. I'm teaching listening, and I didn't pay any attention, right? Adopt a want-to-listen attitude. Again, a lot of times I have to say to myself, I need to hear this. Sometimes I should say, I want to hear this. Sometimes I don't want to hear it, but I need to hear it. But get this attitude out there where you really want to get to that point. And also this has a lot to do, we're going to talk about name memory just for a second here, and that is name memory is all about attitude. Some people say, well, I just don't have a mind for names. I walk up to somebody and I say, hi, my name is Dick. What is Rose going to say? I'm sorry, she's Rosemont. It's B, what's B stand for?
Barbara.
Barbara. She says, hi, my name is?
Barbara.
Barbara, okay. And you know what I was thinking about when I met Barbara? I was thinking about Dick. Am I okay? Is my tie straight? My fly zip? My shoes shined? You know, I'm thinking about all things about Dick. Did I make a good presentation when I met Barbara? Didn't hear her name. Turn around and say, who is that? You know? So what's the next thing I have to do? See, it's an attitude. I want to hear Barbara's name, right? So it's attitude, right? What's the next thing I do, by the way, to remember names?
Say them.
Repeat it, exactly. Just say it. Next couple of sentences, say it. Now, I've had all people say, well, Dick, it was nice to meet you, Dick, and I'm glad, Dick, that you work in before. And okay, I understand you remember my name, all right? They'll say it 10 times in the next 4 sentences, so don't get crazy with it, but do repeat it, all right? And then let others talk and ask questions. We talked enough about that. Learn something from every experience. If you're walking away from a listening experience and you haven't learned something, what haven't you done? You haven't asked the what? The right questions. Oh, I didn't bring my bag in with me, Dave. I don't have a deck of cards. My deck of cards is out in the car. Or I'd show you about asking the right questions. But if you ask the right questions, right in capitals, if you ask the right questions, you will always get the right answers. So if you're getting really answers that are out there and you just can't get the person focused, change your questions. Your questions aren't hitting home. So you've got to get to being better at these questions, okay? And therefore, learning from each experience. And then you got to act on what you hear. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to do what the person said, but you have to act. Biggest complaint I get from employees is that the boss asked us about such and such, and here we told them what to do, and we didn't do it. And what that meant was, even the boss didn't go back to him and say, no, we're not going to do that. Here's the reasons why, but we're not going to do that. They heard nothing. Nothing happened. So biggest issue you have to do is let people know. Make sure you act on what you hear. If it's a good idea, you do it. If it's a bad idea, you better have a good reason to not do it. Let the people know. Okay? When we're talking about, we've got about 20 minutes left, so I wanted to get into this slide. When we're talking about leadership communication, the biggest thing that happens in today's communication and with leaders is change. If we don't change something, everything stays the same. We don't grow, we don't get better, we don't save taxes, we don't get taxes, we don't, all the things that happen, nothing changes. So when we're talking about leadership communication, we're very often talking about navigating change. Because as leaders, we're doing one of two things. We're either making changes or we're navigating the changes ourselves. In other words, getting all the people involved in the change. Or we're looking for the person in our group that can navigate it for me. So I can go on and come up with other ideas. As the leader, the idea person of some kind. So usually what happens is, I'm using the word innovation here, but just think about change, is that something should be different. And when I do, I start to look at what should be. Okay? I look at my department and I say, it works really good. If I were to have it exactly the way it should be, what would it look like? So we describe that. We get a team of people together, for example, and we say, what would be good? What would the should be look like in this department? And some people are going to have some complaints. They're going to say, yeah, we do such and such. So you say, then what should it look like? And some people are going to say, yeah, I've always wanted to have this part of the people working over here and make sure. Terrific. Let's start drawing this picture. Mental picture first, right? And then you might even draw it down. I've had great luck with that, with drawing it down. And once you get this picture of the should be, you start to visualize. Now, this is what leaders do. I don't care if you're talking about your kids at home. I don't care if you're talking about your spouse. I don't care if you're talking about the people who work side by side with you. I don't care if you're talking about the person you work for or the person that works for you. As a leader, you become better at visualizing. Here's a picture of what the future should look like. Once you've made a decision on what the future should look like, the should be, draw a terrific picture. It might be a word picture, it usually is, but draw a really good word picture of the future. Now, the stronger that this visualization of the should be is, what will that mean for your people? The more powerful this word picture is, what will that mean for your people?
They'll be motivated to do something.
Exactly. If they buy into that picture, of course they should be part of drawing the picture, or else they're not part of it, right? So people will move the world for their own idea, right? So the stronger this picture is, the more motivational it is for the team to say, yeah, we could make that happen. So leaders have to get really good at this. What's that vision of the future? Boom. What's it look like? And it's something that we deal with government all the time, right? Fortunately, in Oldham County, we run pretty well in Oldham County. Because I spend most of my time, unfortunately, in Jefferson County, and there are some issues. I mean, they've got a wonderful mayor, and they run a good operation, but they've got issues. And they've got issues they have to deal with every day, bigger and better than ours. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be out constantly looking at what could be better. What could that vision of the future be in a department or in the entire government itself? So then we look at the as is. What do we got so far? You know, we got really good people, highly motivated, lots of smiles on the face. I got them this morning when I kept going into the wrong office. I didn't know where this room was. So I kept bumping into the wrong office. Everybody smiled at me and said, yeah, you're screwed up, go upstairs. So they finally, after I did it twice, I got there. So we start to look at what we've got. Now, people have a tendency to look at the as is in a very negative sense. We don't have this and we don't have that. And some of that's got to be in there. They usually forget what we do have. They forget the intelligence of some of the people. They forget the experience of some of the people. They forget how good their computer system really is in some certain areas. So a lot of times we don't get a very clear picture of an as is. And I probably press people more on this than I do even on the visualization part. Because a lot of people have a tendency just to look at what's wrong rather than what's right. So that's why the as-is picture has to be as clear as you possibly can. Now, as we look at, what do we find out when we look at the should be and we look at the as-is, what do we got? See these two hands? What do we got between them? A gap, thank you. There was an answer to the question other than ask questions and know your people. But we got a gap, so all of a sudden when we see the gap, we say, okay, let's start looking at what is the gap all about. And put it in some kind of order. Prioritize. And a lot of people don't like to prioritize. Now, putting low-hanging fruit aside, low-hanging fruit is something so obvious, you know, and it's going to take no time, no money, let's change it. So just change it. That's different. Beyond low-hanging fruit, we have to look at prioritizing. Some of you heard me tell this story before, but my wife and I, every Saturday, we change the sheets on the bed. And when we get up, boom, we strip everything off and take it downstairs. We might wash it and put them back on, or we might put another set back on. But if I'm alone for that part, if she's out in the kitchen cooking, which I'd rather she did that, I am getting hungry. And if it's my turn, the first thing I do, because there's 6 pillows, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 3, 7 pillows. There's 7 pillows. First thing I do is put the pillows in the pillowcases. Why? It's the hardest thing to do. It's awful. Once that job is over with, we got these long skinny pillows, you know, that go down. You got to stick away. I mean, my arm almost doesn't go all the way back. It's just awful. There's 2 of those. Hate that job. So prioritizing, I say, let's get the stupid pillows out of the way. And then boom, like that. Now my wife immediately just the opposite. My wife is immediate gratification. Let's get the big sheet on. You know? So we put the big sheet on. Then we put the sheet on the fitted sheet. And then we put the sheet on over there. And then we put it over. Now we get to the pillows. Okay, and I'm going, I was not looking forward to the pillows. But see, if you get the pillows out of the way, the rest go just like that, right? So when I show up to work in the morning, that phone call that I make, that's one I don't want to make, right? When I get to work in the morning, it's prioritization that says not just the things I don't want to do, but the things that are important that I don't want to do. Can't go to bed without pillows inside covers, right? So you got to have it. So that's why I think about prioritization, and I think of the things that have to be done, and I don't want to do them. Then I think about the things that have to be done, and I do want to do them. It's a lot easier once you get the ones you don't want to do out of the way. And then we start to look at idea finding. Then we get green light thinking. We have brainstorming sessions we do. By the way, green light thinking means you take down every idea and nobody can say that was a stupid idea. You have to get every single idea. So you do a brainstorming session, you get all the green light thinking, all the great ideas out that you could possibly get. And now you start to look at, so what are some of the solutions? You have to red light. You have to say some ideas are good, some are bad. We're going to put a couple of ideas together, etc. But this is what leaders do. Leaders follow a very clear path to an innovation, a change of some kind. Because change is going to happen. We used to say when I worked in a shipyard in downtown Norfolk, Virginia, we used to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? What do you say today? If it ain't broke, break it and make it better, exactly. So we're constantly looking at ways, Sullivan University, for example, just the stuff that we have to go through. The government regulation is colossal. You know what government regulation is like. Government regulation is colossal in our business. State and federal government, local government, just colossal. And so we're constantly having to change and make things better and different and change. And what does the community need now, which brought up the College of Pharmacy. There wasn't one here. Now there is. And now we're starting a physician's assistant program. You know, I mean, there wasn't one in the community. Now there is. So those kind of things all came from this. Visualization still, by the way, generally comes from the Chancellor Sullivan, the guy whose name is on the building. He comes up with these great ideas, and now we go through all this and say, how can we put it together? It's going to be your check, Chancellor, but how are we going to put it together? And then, of course, acceptance finding. We got to get approval of everyone. We got to get the people involved. So as you look at your people and you say, okay, we've got this big change coming. Here's the change that we would like to happen. If this is strong enough, I might have gained a lot of people's support and approval along the way. But I still have to work. I'm constantly working on this. The people I work for, the people working for me, the people on my side, anybody that is, any stakeholder, any person that it's going to affect in any way, I have to get that approval and support. I've got to make it work. So if I've done my job here well enough, and I've used the right people on the team to get to this point, usually it isn't a big deal. But in some cases it is. What if I take my team, which happens more often than it should probably, what if I take my team and we come up with great ideas, because we're not really part of the university, we're part of the system, we're a training company inside the university. And so we might come up with some really great ideas. Well, all of a sudden the chancellor hears about it, and he says, whoa, wait a minute. That was wrong. I should have had the chancellor involved all along since he was going to write the check, right? Or whatever it is. So you have to be really careful. All along sometimes the right people need to know what's going on, how the change is going so that you can get support from everyone. Whoops. And then, of course, somebody's got to do something. A lot of times we get all this done and it all sounds terrific. We got this great plan in place and nobody does anything. So somebody's got to implement it. Somebody's got to take the initiative to put things into action. I've got lots of piles of ideas and stuff on my desk that nobody grabbed a hold of, and including me, nobody grabbed a hold of and actually did it. That usually means that the visualization wasn't good enough. The future wasn't big enough. Wasn't a big enough deal. And then, of course, follow-up. Some people complain to me about follow-up. Dick, you're micromanaging me right over my shoulder. I said, yeah, I'm going to for a while, until you do things right. Then I'm going to let you go. Anybody ever read the book, The 1 Minute Manager? It was 25 years ago or something like that. Actually, Mr. Blanchard, I introduced him at a meeting one time. He's a delightful man. My favorite comment out of the whole thing was, teach somebody how to do something and then look right over their shoulder, manage them, micromanage them, until you catch them doing something right. And when you catch them doing it right, you say, you got it. Walk away. Let them go. But we have to do it. We have to monitor implementation. And so people do complain to me once in a while when I am looking over their shoulder. And I say, if I wasn't looking over your shoulder and I told you to do this, and I was never going to follow up, eventually you'd stop doing it. And you'd say, he doesn't care. Why should we do it? He doesn't care. I need for you to know I care. And as soon as we got this going in the right direction, I'll back off. I'll just check in once a week. And then, of course, we evaluate. We assess things. We say, okay, how did it go? All right. Now, this slide is in your book. So when you're ever looking at the innovation process, I want to change something in my department. It might be a small thing. For example, at Toyota, I have trouble saying the word Toyota. That's why I say it like that. At Toyota in Georgetown, do you know how many changes they make a month? 2,000. They average 2,000 changes a month. Now, it may only be moving a piece of equipment 1 inch to make something easier to get to, get at, slower, faster, whatever, however it has to be. But they make enormous amount, and they get all these ideas from the employees. We expect you to tell us something every month, a change of some kind. So as you look at your department, you say, wow, we don't make 2 changes in a month. And that's typical of my department. I have to be careful that we're making more than 2 changes a month. So we start looking at these things, and then we start identifying and we start assessing as I look at all this, and I say, what's next? Are we going to keep this in place? Are we going to keep part of it? Are we going to throw it all out? Start over again? Whatever it is. And then, so we're in place. We're starting to work with it. We like it. The vision's good. Now what? What's next? So I'm always looking at what's next. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about communicating change. But as we look at communicating change to people, the obvious thing is we have opening things, which are usually shocking statements of some kind. I might say, how would you like to save this department $100,000 a year? And you say, wow, that's good. Now, you may know that $100,000 a year in your department is impossible, so you're out. It wasn't practical. So if I said $50,000, you might say, that's practical. So you made a shocking, startling statement to get me involved. If you'd have said $5,000, it's not enough, right? So you have to know what your team is thinking about a startling statement. What's practical that makes it achievable? Sometimes just asking questions. Sometimes it's a mystery statement. Boy, wait till you see the way this new process works in another government agency. You're going to be shocked. Mystery statement. What is it? Okay. And then some sort of compliment of a department. This department runs better than any department that we've got. And then some sort of drama incident. I like drama, but I don't use it that much. Forms of evidence. I did want to get and talk about this. When you have ideas, you do want to get we've only got 5 minutes. When you have ideas, you want to have your ideas backed up. You may have people that don't agree with your ideas. So if you go into a meeting, for example, you go into a meeting prepared to back up your ideas. All right? Now the other person may come into a meeting prepared to back up their ideas. Who's got the most and the strongest evidence? And here's what happens. I might have demonstrations. Now, I don't use demonstrations very much because they're cutesy, and I'm not a cutesy guy. But I'm going to tell you about a demonstration that I saw 28 years ago in a classroom. And the guy came in, it was a 1-minute demonstration, that's all the time he had, and we were supposed to demonstrate something in 1 minute. And he came in with a 4-foot board, a little Jeep, and a Weeble. And he took the board, he put it up against the wall, slanted. He took the Jeep, put it here, put the Weeble in it, ran it down, boom. Weeble goes out, bumps its head, and boom, falls down, right? Brings it up, takes it back up, puts a rubber band around the Weeble, goes down the thing, boom, Weeble stays in. The only words the guy said in the 1-minute demonstration was, wear your seatbelt. I thought, oh my goodness. I've been telling that story for 28 years. Why? Absolutely blew me away. Now that's a demo that works. In some cases I don't have demos that work quite so well, but I like some of the other things, examples, usually examples out of my life or out of somebody else's life, strong examples that I've heard. I use those a lot. Facts. When you know something is a fact, of course a fact to you might not be a fact to me, so it has to in fact be a fact before I can use it. Exhibits. Same kind of thing. I might have a picture of some kind or a certificate of some kind. Analogies, I love to use analogies. Well, life is like a golf game. You stand on the first tee and you swing that driver as hard as you can, but you haven't a clue where the ball is going to land, right? So kind of working with things like that. I like analogy. Testimonials of experts. I often cut them out of the newspaper or cut them out of a magazine of some kind. This has got to be somebody that I trust. Usually they agree with me, but somebody that I trust enough to be able to call them an expert and take their testimony. Now, because I'm a Six Sigma guy, and I do teach statistics when I'm doing Six Sigma training of some kind, I also believe in statistics. A lot of times, bring me data. I'll make the statistic out of it, but you bring me the data, and I'll agree with you if it's the right stuff. So these forms of evidence, whenever I'm trying to make a point, whenever I'm trying to move forward, whenever I'm trying to move the team to a new change, to a new idea, I'm going to have as many of these as I can. Now, I'm not going to beat people up over the head with them, but I'm going to have them. I'm going to use what I need in order to get it done. So the biggest thing that happens to a leader is communicating change. I'm not going to go through the closings. I'm going to go through this one here. Is I will throw down a challenge to my team. When I'm looking for a change, I usually make my points very strongly right here. I'll make a very strong point about why we need the change. I'll have all kinds of data. I'll have all kinds of statistics. I'll have all kinds of analogies. I might even have some examples, and I might even have a demo, might have an exhibit, and certainly anytime I can get a good testimony from some expert, I will use it. But in the end, I might throw down a challenge and say, folks, if we do this, it will be the best thing that's happened to this department in 10 years.